I was looking at my bookshelf this morning, just staring at the history section.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this very, I don't know, comfortable idea about what those books represent. We think of history as geology or something.
Oh, right, like it's bedrock.
It's bedrock, it's solid, something happens, a battle, a treaty, whatever, and gets etched into the timeline like a fossil. It's immovable.
It's that old carved in stone metaphor. We just assume that if a major event happens, especially something, loud and violent like a battle, it's going to leave a footprint you just can't wash away.
Exactly. It demands to be remembered. We expect to find what I call the big three.
Okay.
If you and I go looking for an event, we expect records, we expect explanations, and we expect consequences.
The triad. Records tell us what happened, explanations tell us why, and consequences tell us what changed because of it.
That's the basic contract between the past and us. But today we're diving into something that just completely shatters that contract. We've been digging into this really fascinating and honestly slightly disturbing report. It's titled Texto Colado.
And it analyzes a specific battle that defies that rule. It left behind huge consequences, but the records and the explanations,
they're not just missing.
No, they've been actively stripped away. And I think that's the distinction we have to make right at the start of this deep dive.
What do you mean?
We're not talking about something that was just, forgotten over time. This isn't lost to the sands of time or a library fire.
No, this is the difference between losing your keys and someone stealing your car and then painting over the parking spot so it looks like a car was never there.
That is a surprisingly good analogy.
Like, sure?
Yeah. We are looking at a battle that was systematically dismantled in the archives.
Okay, so before we get into the how, which is just wild, I have to ask the question I'm sure everyone is thinking right now.
Go for it.
Is this a conspiracy theory? Are we getting into tinfoil hat territory here? Because erasing history sounds like, I don't know, the plot of a thriller.
And I'm glad you asked that, because that is the first hurdle the source material clears. And the answer is no.
No.
If you really look at the analysis in Texto Colado, it's not framed as a conspiracy. Not in the Hollywood sense, anyway. This isn't about, shadowy figures in a back room deciding to brainwash everyone.
Which is almost scarier, isn't it? If it's not some big villain, then what is it?
It's an analysis of bureaucratic efficiency.
Bureaucratic efficiency.
Yeah. We're looking at the mechanics of erasure. We're going to unpack how an event gets edited out of existence, not through magic, but through paperwork. It's a look at deliberate procedural omission.
It just feels so strange to do a deep dive where our subject is what is literally not there.
I know.
Usually our job is to tell you, here's the battle, here's the general, here's what happened. Today, we're trying to figure out how history was made to say nothing happened at all.
Think of it like forensic accounting, but for history itself. We're not looking for the event so much as the empty space it left behind. We're tracing the silhouette of the silence.
Okay, so let's get our hands dirty with this source material, because Texto Colado sets up this timeline, that is. It's fractured. It shows a very clear before and after.
And that's the smoking gun right there. To understand the erasure, you have to look at the early records.
The first drafts of history.
Exactly. The source points out that right after the event, this battle did exist. It wasn't born invisible.
So contemporary sources, we're talking about old newspapers.
Yes. Old newspapers from that week, initial military briefings, even the first academic papers that mention it. It's all there. It's loud. It's bloody. It was reported.
So it wasn't a secret. The public knew about it when it happened.
Not at all. It was acknowledged. The fracture, as you put it, that happens later. It happens in the revisions.
Yeah.
When the history goes from being breaking news to being an official textbook.
This is the part of the research that honestly gave me chills.
Yeah.
The source describes how, in later editions of these same records, things just start to shift. It's like watching pixels vanish from a digital photo. Paragraphs are just removed.
And it's not just the text. It's visual, too. The source specifically notes that maps are redrawn.
Redrawn was like they delete a hill or something.
Not the terrain, no, but the context on the terrain. So imagine a map in a history book that shows troop movements.
Okay.
In the, say, 1950 edition, there's a big section showing this battle arrows, explosion markers, battle lines. But in the 1970 edition, the map is the same, but that whole engagement is gone. The arrows they bypass that valley now.
Like they just drove around it.
Exactly. And the footnotes disappear. Which, for any historian, that's like burying the body.
Because that's the trail.
That's the whole trail. You remove the citation, you make it impossible for the next researcher to pull on that thread.
But there was this one specific detail from the source that It really stuck with me. They call them the ghost dates.
Yeah. This is such a profound insight into the mechanism. It answers the question, how do you hide a whole week? Because the erasure isn't clumsy. They don't just rip the page out of the calendar.
Right, because you'd see the jagged edge. You'd know a page was missing.
You'd see the gap. Exactly. So the dates of the event, let's say it happened from the 12th to the 15th, those dates are still there.
The calendar is intact.
Precisely. But the events within those dates are removed. It's not that the time vanished. It's that the content of that time was overwritten.
That is so eerie.
Right.
It's like reading a biography where it says, from 1995 to 1996, he lived in London, and then there's just nothing. No detail about what he did. The time is accounted for, but the life is missing.
That's a great way to put it. The source uses the phrase overwritten. The event doesn't vanish. It's displaced by silence. The timeline stays intact, which makes the omission much, much harder to spot.
You don't know what you're missing because the space has been filled in with something else.
Exactly. It's filler. It's narrative spackle to cover the hole in the wall.
Okay, so let's talk about the how, because the source is very clear. This wasn't an emotional thing. This wasn't someone screaming, burn the tapes.
No, the phrasing it uses is bureaucratic and cold. And honestly, that's why it works so well. Rage is messy. Bureaucracy is clean.
It was process.
It's a toolkit. The analysis in the source points to a few key techniques, a sort of toolkit of erasure.
Okay, walk us through it. If I want to hide a battle, what's the first tool I grab?
The first is reclassification.
Which sounds incredibly boring.
And that's the point.
I guess so.
Words have weight. You call something a battle, and it demands attention. It implies stakes, heroes, villains, death. But if you reclassify that same event as a skirmish or a police action or, my favorite from the source, a sector adjustment.
A sector adjustment. That sounds like something you do with a spreadsheet, not artillery.
Exactly. It loses all its gravity. It flies under the radar. You don't investigate a sector adjustment. You investigate a battle.
You're basically changing the genre from war epic to instructional video on logistics.
You got it. Then there's language softening.
Okay.
So instead of heavy casualties, you say personnel attrition. Instead of retreat, you use strategic redeployment.
It makes it feel less human. Attrition is a math term. Casualties is a human term. Retreat implies fear. Redeployment implies a plan.
Precisely. You strip the emotion out, and then there's merging. This one is so effective because it uses the truth to hide the truth.
How does that work?
You take this specific problematic battle, and you just fold it into a larger operation.
So it loses its identity.
Completely. It just becomes a bullet point in a much bigger report. Instead of the Battle of Hill 402, it becomes operations in the northern sector continued through March. The battle is still in there, technically, but it's been diluted to the point of being invisible.
You build a haystack on top of the needle on purpose.
And the last big one is redefining.
This is the one that felt the most insidious to me.
It's the gaslighting technique. You just label the event insignificant. You argue that it doesn't fit the structure of important history. We're not hiding it. It just wasn't worth writing down.
Yeah, the source highlights the phrasing. History doesn't say, we erased this. It implies it became unnecessary to mention.
Or it stops being cited. It's passive. It relies on our trust that historians know what matters, and this just didn't make the cut.
But that's the lie, isn't it? Because you can call it insignificant, but the physical reality, it says something else entirely.
This is where the bureaucratic narrative just hits a hard wall. The source calls this the problem with insignificant. You can edit the papers, but you can't edit the gravity of what happened to actual human bodies.
So let's look at the contradictions. First up, casualty numbers.
Right. The official log says minor skirmish, but then you look at the casualty returns, the list of dead and wounded from that week, and the numbers just don't match.
Minor skirmishes don't fill field hospitals.
They do not. The math reveals the lie. An event you call minor does not require mass triage or hundreds of body bags. The logistics of death betray the silence.
And then there are the medals, the decorations. This part really stopped me.
It's a profound irony, isn't it? The source points out that you have soldiers receiving medals for valor, for bravery under fire, for actions that, according to the later history books, officially no longer exist.
Can you imagine being that soldier? You have this medal. You remember everything. But you open the official history 20 years later, and it just says, quiet sector.
It's a huge cognitive dissonance, and you see it with the survivors' accounts, too. They're all consistent. They all tell the same story, but the official record just meets them with silence.
It is gaslighting on a historical scale.
Right.
Telling people their trauma isn't real. because it's inconvenient.
And this is the key analysis in the report. An event described as minor does not usually require this level of administrative correction.
Right. If it really didn't matter, why go to all that trouble? Why redraw the maps and scrub the footnotes?
That's the tell, to use a poker term. The effort it took to erase it is the ultimate proof of its importance. You don't spend that much energy hiding something that genuinely doesn't matter.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question. Why? Why do it? Why not just spin the story? Why delete it?
The source is very careful here, which I appreciate. It doesn't speculate. It lists what it calls non-speculative constraints. It frames the erasure as a problem of structural incompatibility.
Structural incompatibility. That sounds like an engineering problem. A square peg in a round hole.
Official history is a kind of engineering. You're building a narrative structure. And sometimes an event like this battle is a brick that just doesn't fit the wall. If you put it in, the whole structure leans the wrong way.
So what makes a battle unusable, a bad brick?
A few things. First, the outcome might not support the main story. Maybe the good guys lost badly. Maybe the invincible army was routed. If your national story is one of unbroken strength, a disaster just doesn't fit.
Okay, that makes sense. We want to be the heroes. We don't want the chapter where we get humiliated.
Then there are tactics. The source says the tactics used might have contradicted established military doctrine.
So they did something they weren't supposed to do.
Or they did something that proves the standard way of fighting is wrong. Imagine your doctrine says, we never do X. But in this battle, they did X, and it was the only thing that worked.
Admitting that would undermine the entire military dogma.
It makes the generals look incompetent. It makes the textbooks wrong. It's better to pretend the battle didn't happen than to admit the rule book is wrong.
Wow.
And of course, politics, legal or political risk. Maybe the battle happened in a place it wasn't supposed to be.
Or involve people who weren't supposed to be there.
Right. Acknowledging the battle would, as the source puts it, raise questions that couldn't be controlled.
That's the key phrase right there, isn't it? Questions that couldn't be controlled.
That's the nightmare for any bureaucracy. Questions where the answer causes more damage than silence does. If admitting the battle means admitting a war crime or a huge diplomatic failure, silence is safer.
So the erasure isn't emotional. It's not about shame. It's a structural necessity.
Precisely. To maintain the official story, this chapter had to be cut. It wasn't just denied, it was removed because keeping it threatened the integrity of the whole narrative.
It really changes how you look at a history book. We assume we're getting a recording of events, but what we're really reading is an edit.
A final cut? Absolutely. We're seeing the theatrical release, not the director's cut, and definitely not the raw footage.
So let's just synthesize all this. We started with a battle that existed. It was in the papers. It was real.
And then, through reclassification, language softening, merging, it was slowly dissolved, managed out of existence.
The paragraphs were cut, the maps were redrawn, and those ghost dates remained, but the truth inside them was just hollowed out.
And it was all done because the event was unusable. It was structurally incompatible with the story the institution needed to tell about itself.
It's just terrifyingly efficient.
And that brings us to the source's conclusion, which I think is so profound. It says, history doesn't always lie. Sometimes it reorganizes itself to avoid certain facts.
Reorganizes itself. That sounds so harmless, like tidying up a room.
Yes, but they're rearranging reality. It's not a clumsy lie. The battle wasn't denied in some screaming match. It was simply made unnecessary to remember.
That phrase is going to stick with me.
Yeah.
Made unnecessary to remember.
It implies memory is a curated product. And studying the silence, studying what isn't there, tells you just as much about a society as studying what is. It tells you what they fear.
It's like the negative space in a painting. It defines the shape of the object.
Exactly. If you want to know the shape of a culture, don't just look at their statues. Look at the empty pedestals. Look at the dates in the history books where nothing seems to happen.
This has been a heavy one, but really important. We've looked into the empty spaces in the archives. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to mull over.
What's that?
We've been talking about one specific battle from one report. But if we start to view history as a series of edits rather than a pure recording, how many other unnecessary chapters have been reorganized out of the books on your shelf right now?
That is a question worth asking, maybe worth checking the footnotes for, if they're still there.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of silence.
Always a pleasure.
Keep asking questions, especially when the answers seem to be missing. We'll see you next time.